Okay. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Casey Murphy, and I'm ACT's Director of Programs and Events. I want to thank you for joining us today for ACT's first of two September webinars entitled Safe, Confident January Return to Office. Before we hear from our presenters this afternoon, I wanted to quickly take care of a few housekeeping items. First, all attendees are on mute during this webinar. If you have a question or have a problem hearing us, please type it in the chat box located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to answer your questions as the webinar gets going. Second, we will be hosting a Q&A at the end of the webinar, but please feel free to type in your questions as we go in the Q&A box located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Please note when asking a question to also identify who the question is for when typing it in. Finally, this session is being recorded. We'll have the recording up on the ACT website within 24 hours after the presentation ends. Now I'd like to go ahead and introduce David Strauss, ACT's Executive Director, to give an update on what ACT has going on. David?
Excellent. Thank you, Casey. Good afternoon, everybody. As the premier association for TDM professionals, ACT's goal is to build a strong community of individuals and organizations working to advance and implement TDM at their work sites and within their communities. We have a great audience for today's webinar with over 250 registrants. I want to thank all of you that have participated last month in ACT's Virtual International Conference, and remind you as well that access to the breakout sessions and keynote speakers remains open through October. There's some great presentations there, and I hope you take advantage of the unique opportunity to watch them on demand. If you're not yet a member, I invite you to join your colleagues and become a part of our community. I guarantee you that ACT membership will be a valued investment in your professional and personal growth. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to update everyone on some of the news from ACT. As I'm sure that many of you know, ACT had to make the difficult decision to cancel our in-person TDM forum that was to be held in Atlanta in November. ACT's Programs and Events Committee has begun planning to replace this event with a one-day virtual event that focuses heavily on interactive sessions, networking, and deep dives into current TDM issues. The event will also feature the release and announcement of ACT's 40 Under 40 honorees. So stay tuned for more details on the event in the coming weeks. I'm also thrilled to announce that last week, ACT launched Connect, our new online member community where ACT brings TDM professionals together. This is an exciting new benefit for ACT members to post questions, share resources, and network with their colleagues. If you have not yet logged on, I encourage you to do so today by visiting connect.actweb.org. In the coming weeks, unique communities for chapters and councils will also open on the site. ACT continues to advocate for the advancement of TDM at the federal level. Our More Through TDM legislation continues to pick up co-sponsors, but your support and voice is critical. I encourage all members to take a few minutes of time to learn about the benefits of the legislation for TDM and your programs, and to take the time to perhaps draft a letter of support to your local member of Congress. On a related note, federal transportation authorization expires at the end of the month. While the House has introduced the Invest in America Act, action has been limited on the Senate. We anticipate an agreement to extend the current legislation will be reached in the coming weeks. This also provides ACT with more time to build further support for our legislation and to support TDM supportive language within a new transportation authorization bill. Internally, I'd like to remind all members that voting for ACT's Board of Directors and officers closes this Friday. We have a large number of members running for positions, and I strongly encourage all of you to review the candidates and submit your vote. In addition to national elections, several chapters have or will soon open nominations for chapter board positions. Serving on a chapter board is a fantastic opportunity to lead TDM efforts on a local and regional level. And in early October, ACT will open nominations seeking interest from members to serve on one of ACT's 6 national board committees. including public policy, professional development, governance, and others. These are great opportunities to take on direct leadership roles, helping advance the organization at the national level. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's webinar, Safe, Confident January, Return to Office. As many employers are now aiming for a larger percentage of their workforce to return to the office by January 2021, and let's hope that holds, employers and transportation providers are looking for how to ensure a safe return to work. So today we've got a great panel, and please join me in welcoming Steve Rainey, Regional TDM Manager at ALTRANS TMA, to introduce our speakers and kick off today's session. Steve?
Thanks very much, David. So on our panel today, we have Hannah Lindelof, who is a planning group manager at BART. And from AC Transit, we have Cecil Blandon, Director of Maintenance, and Tabby Davenport, the Safety Administrator. And both agencies are part of Bay Area Healthy Transit, which is really this unique national leader in safety research for transit and in confidence boosting messaging to accelerate return to transit. And so I encourage everybody to go to the website and read articles and such. And I am from ALTRANS TMA. We are a 29-year-old Bay Area company that provides TDM services to employers and TMAs, including bus route management and analytics. And I want to point your attention to the 7 elements for safe office return bit.ly, which will take you to a Google Doc. That's kind of backing for this presentation. And also the Google slides are available off of a bit.ly capital RTO slides. And we're going to pull these links up at the end as well. So we've got a lot of content to go through. I'm going to give an intro and then provide a module of virus transmission education, which will kind of set the table to go into the safety measures that BART and AC Transit are taking. Then we'll come back to me to talk about 7 layers of safety for return to office, and then we have questions. So we've got a poll now for everybody to take. Have you corrected a stranger's mask wearing for social benefit? So have you seen somebody who is the sniffer and is exposing their nose? Have you seen folks wearing the masks with vents that allow virus particles to spew onto other people?
We'll give it here just another few seconds here for you, Steve.
Pretty good response rate.
Yep.
So
right, we'll show the results.
So we've got 82% no, and there's really no easy permission structure out in the general public to correct a stranger's behavior for societal benefit. But hopefully we can change that and have a permission structure for return to office. So heading on. So there's plenty of motivation for returning to office. 60% of California restaurant workers are furloughed. We're sick of working from home. We've got new hires that need mentoring. Work provides social opportunities. We potentially are going to have future pandemics, so we need to go through this and learn how to return to normal. And these changes are typically going to help our health and productivity. Transit agencies' finances are in the doldrums. And as TDM professionals, we want to stay employed. Now, I also want to point out that there's an equity issue in that we're going to be able to do a really great job of keeping office workers safe. And so far, we are not providing the same level of safety for warehouse workers, people in prisons, and in other places, and that's inequitable. And also want to acknowledge that this is a bit of a somber topic just because people have lost loved ones. So use this content at your own risk. This is really a framework for considerations for January return. Everything's still evolving. Your implementation is going to be customized. And we're watching all these advances every week and testing, tracing, and knowledge that's going to change our guidance. So moving from the introduction to education, one official told me that the general public is just not following the basic guidance. That's why we're seeing spikes in virus. And so they're not focused on return to office. And with the general public, there's no way to easily provide high quality mass education to everyone. And in fact, social media tends to misinform people. But that's not the case with offices. And there's really no excuse not to provide each employee with very high quality training. So this should be our public health education utopia. And so I'm going to provide an example of one module that would fit into an education program. This will be on airborne transmission. We'll cover that in the next 6 slides. So we want people to know why we're doing these safety measures. And in the last 4 weeks, the world has kind of flipped from focusing on surface transmission to airborne transmission. So it's all that more important to educate people. And when you engage with employees, you want that rich Q&A, and you want to build buy-in as they dig deep into this topic. And ACT companies are ready to help employers because we're in the behavior change and education space, and this is somewhat akin to what we're already doing in TDM. So when we start our module for airborne transmission, one of the key concepts is we're going to reduce the chance that somebody who's infected walks into your office, and then we're going to have a robust defense in case somebody does walk in. And so by 2 separate systems working together, we can really reduce the risk of transmitting virus within the office. It is akin to running a 2-engine airplane that can fly on 1 engine. Same concept. So for airborne transmission, we want employees to build a mental model of a cloud of cigarette smoke of virus particles emitting from their mouth and nose. It's dense right in front of your face, and then it disperses. And you do need to obtain a significant amount of virus particles to get infected. So the 3-person picture up there, if you just hang out for 5 seconds, you're probably okay. But if you sit there and chat for 10 minutes, then you're really exposing yourself. And then there's a hierarchy of the amount of virus we emit. Not much when we breathe, more when we talk, even more when we sing and shout, and even more when we cough and sneeze. And outdoor air is safer than indoor air, because if you think about that cloud of smoky virus, then the wind just blows that virus away immediately. And this is a tricky virus, of course, because of asymptomatic spread. And your employees will want to have a separate educational module on surface transmission as well, which is sort of easier to comprehend, you could say. Now, there are different size particles, and the big particles get pulled down to the ground by gravity, and the small particles tend to fly around in the air for a long time, and they can present danger. And now you can go on YouTube and see a super slow motion of what it looks like when you sneeze to better envision the virus smoke. The key example is on January 24th, person A1 came into this restaurant and infected 8 other people. They were at tables A, B, and C, but not at the other tables. And the reason was there was this terrible looping airflow that moved the virus around between those 3 tables. Now, your office will not have this risk, but it's important to show the virus smoke cloud and how it infects people. And also, you will not have an office like this Korean call center where the blue chairs all got infected, like 50% of people in the top got infected. So for that mental model for your employees, we have to do an oversimplified education on heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, HVAC. So if somebody sneezes in that office, those red virus particles are sucked out of the room. Some are exhausted to the outside, and some come back into the room, but they're filtered first to remove those virus particles. And our preference right now is to bring in virus-free outdoor air rather than recirculate. And that works great, except when it's really hot and really cold, because we have to do more, so we tend to have to recirculate. And in California, now we require MERV 13 filtration, which removes about 80% of virus particles. And the other requirement is to have 10 air changes per hour. So we take every single molecule of air in that office and suck it out within 6 minutes. And when you have MERV 13, the first pass removes 80%, and then after 12 minutes, you get to 96% of those virus particles removed, which is great in theory, but in fact, not every air molecule moves out of the office at the same rate. And that's why you want to bring in your professional HVAC engineer to make sure there's no dead air spots. And sometimes we use fog in clean rooms to watch the air get sucked out. And in this particular example, that air gets sucked out in 2 seconds. It's very high quality air cleaning. And we're also going to make sure the virus is less, the humidity is less virus friendly. That's a key part. So if you do have some dead air spots, then we use portable HEPA air purifiers to purify a few square feet around where they are. And that can help with office safety. So with the airborne transmission education as background, that's a good lead in to Hannah to talk about BART and so forth.
Thank you, Steve. As a transit provider, BART and several of the other Bay Area transit agencies have been providing transit service to essential workers throughout the course of the pandemic. And we're really working to be ready to welcome back a larger population when the shelter in place ends and folks start to return to the office. So we collaborated and developed the Bay Area Healthy Transit Plan. So this is a collaborative effort led by multiple Bay Area transit operators across 9 counties and large and small operators. So the goals of this plan was to create a common health and safety commitment. So these were all of the efforts that we were all committing to. So sort of the baseline efforts that we're establishing for consistency for riders. So they can go between transit providers and across county lines where the public health requirements may vary, and have some consistency and know what to expect when they ride transit. And so we're really trying to build passenger confidence through development of this plan. So we have protocols to reduce transmission risk, adaptable and shared measures, and each operator is accountable for implementation of this plan in the region. Next slide. So just an overview of the different types of commitments that are included in the plan. So we have information about face coverings, safe distancing and capacity on board, hand hygiene, a quiet ride program that we'll be rolling out. And this speaks to Steve's information about how more virus spreads when you're talking or singing. So if you're quiet, you have less droplets. Daily cleaning and disinfecting, improved ventilation, moving towards touchless fares, so no cash payments, and then providing PPE for employees, supporting contact tracing, and enhancing our paratransit protocols. So for all of these mitigations, we outline what agencies should be implementing, as well as what the passenger role is. So there's also a role of the passenger to come with your mask, wear your mask properly, and then on board, we'll provide the capacity, and then you distance yourself from other riders on board. We'll also have a communication strategy and a commitment to report on our progress. Next slide. So just a little bit of information about BART's implementation of the plan and how it relates to our 15-step plan, which is what BART's sort of effort is internally. So as I noted, the Healthy Transit Plan is sort of the baseline that the common measures every agency is implementing across the region. And so each agency, most agencies are going above and beyond that plan. So BART's 15-step plan includes safe distancing and capacity. So if you think about a train car is maybe 100% office, they're designed for 115 passengers. I think we were up to about 160 per train during a peak load across the tube. We found that riders can maintain social distancing of 6 feet with about 30 people per car. If you use a measure like the World Health Organization or some European agencies of 3 feet, you could have 60 people per car. But what we're doing right now is putting load charts online to help riders see when our trains are busiest. Our ridership has been very consistent by time of day, and the peak has shifted to an earlier hour than it used to be. And then we're adding trains in to provide additional service to try to reach that 30-person per car average. So the load charts you can see in the example here, we have most of our cars are in the 0 through 24 people per train. So with plenty of capacity for that 6-foot distancing. And you can go online and see what time of day you're more likely to get those green cars. Next slide. We also have, when you ride a BART car, you'll be riding, the air is more filtered more effectively than in the typical office or indoor setting. The entire car's air is replaced about every 70 seconds. So currently the ventilation is about 75% recycled and 25% fresh. And the recirculated air is filtered prior to being dispersed through the window frame. So right now we're using MERV 8 filters and currently piloting MERV 14 filters on our cars to see how those function, make sure we can maintain them and that they function well in our system. We'll be rolling that out, as well as testing UV lighting in the HVAC ductwork of trains to kill viruses in the airflow. Next slide. And then we're looking at communication. So we can put all the measures in place, and the key thing is to make sure that it's well communicated to employees, to riders. Everybody understands what we're doing and what we expect of passengers returning. So wearing face masks, practicing social distancing, using hand sanitizer. All of our stations have extra masks available by request at our station agent booths. Mask compliance on our trains is high, and we'll be actually rolling out a survey to get actual percentage compliance numbers to share with the public. All stations also have at least 2 hand sanitizer stations. Larger stations have more than that. And we do quality check once a week to make sure that all of those units are full. We're also selling $5 hand straps so that you don't have to touch the train when you ride. And then of course we're conducting our extra cleaning. So on the next slide, some more details on the extra cleaning we're doing. So we're using hospital grade disinfectant, wiping down train poles and touch points multiple times a day. We're using the electrostatic foggers every 24 hours, and we are exploring new technologies. So for all of these components, we are always open to and exploring what the best practice is, learning from our partners, and exploring new options and strategies for making transit increasingly safe for riders. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to our partners at AC Transit to hear about their ventilation work as well.
Thank you, Hannah. So I'm Cecil, I'm the Director of Maintenance for AC Transit. So today, we want to focus on one specific area when it comes to the bus safety, and that's the interior of the bus. As we've been dealing with the pandemic, we've all learned how to maintain our homes clean using the correct chemicals. And as Hannah was explaining in the workplace, all the agencies have implemented new procedures to clean, changed out chemicals, introductions of foggers, electrostatic sprayers for the daily, sanitizing and disinfecting of the fleet. At AC Transit, with our fleet of 640 buses, it's very important for us to make sure that the air inside the coach is safe for everyone throughout the day. So today, we did a test, and I'll have Tabby Davenport explain, the process that we did. But there was lots of opinions coming towards the district, whether it's from outside sources, internal, our fellow coworkers from the union, and even some leadership as far as how do you set up a bus to be the safest for everyone on board. So this image that we see, the slide here, is that representation of what the work we did and what that setup is. So Tabby, pass it on to Tabby to just explain what the process that we did to come up to where this slide came from.
Yes, good morning and good afternoon to everybody, depending on where you are. I'm Tabby Davenport, the safety manager at AC Transit. And as Cecil explained, we received several comments and several publications on different strategies to ventilate the coach during the COVID pandemic, because ventilation is an important aspect to the prevention of exposure to the passengers and to the operator. So what we've done is there were all different types of suggestions, ranging from opening windows to closing the windows and opening the operator's window. So based on all the different feedback that we received, we decided to go ahead and try a smoke test. And what that entailed was we took a couple of different models of coaches out, and we released the fog or smoke inside the vehicle. First off, while the vehicle was moving, we released the smoke in the bus, on the interior of the bus, to check the weight of the smoke. And it weighted at about a 0 gravity, because once the smoke was released in the air, it pretty much, as the bus was moving, it stayed exactly where it was. It didn't rise any further, or it didn't drop any further. So the weight of the smoke appeared to be a decent weight for our testing purposes, to see what the behavior was once we started the test, to see what different configurations would work. And what we did is we started out with, the first test that we started out with was to open up the operator's window, which is one of the things that everybody likes to do, is when you're ventilating the interior of the coach, is operators, most of the time, they believe that if you open up the operator's window, that brings more fresh air into the bus. And what we found out is as the bus was moving and we opened up the operator's window and released the smoke, it begins to slowly make its way towards the front of the bus. And once it reaches the front of the bus, that is the only exit that the smoke will take. So what that mimics is the particulates in the air, if there is any in the air, that is going to travel out and past the operator's face before it makes the exit through the operator's window. So we determined pretty quickly that that's the one thing that we absolutely do not want to do, is to expose the operator to all of the particulates that are inside of the bus. And so we closed the operator's window, and we opened up some of the windows in the rear of the coach as the smoke was released. And interestingly enough, what happens when you open up the rear windows, the air begins to move towards the rear of the coach. And mind you, this is all taking place right now without the HVAC system turned on. Everything is turned off at this point, and we're just using the free-flowing air that we're getting from the open windows. And when you open up the rear windows of the coach, what happens is the air starts to move to the rear of the coach and takes a turn and begins to move towards the front. And so what happens is, eventually all the air inside of the coach, all the smoke inside of the coach, will collect at the front of the coach and sit there until it receives an exit route. So that would be either when you pull into a coach stop and open the doors, or open up the operator's window, then you'll have an exit route. And again, the operator's window is the last thing that you want to do, because we don't want the particulates to exit through the in the path of the operator's face. So so the last test that we and mind you, some buses do have rear hatches. For those of you who are not familiar with it, there's a rear hatch, as you can see in the diagram that's showing there, towards the rear of the bus, where it says with the windows closed, how the positive air, how the positive pressure forces old air out through the roof hatch. The roof hatch is what it's designed for. It's designed for an overturned vehicle. If the bus should land on its side, the doors are blocked, that is an escape route. So it is large enough that if you open up the rear hatch and it's removed, that people can exit through the rear hatch and leave the bus. But what we also use it for is for ventilation. And what that does is, once the smoke is released into the air and we turned on the HVAC system, the HVAC begins to immediately move the smoke towards the rear of the bus, and it moves at a pretty rapid pace. And it moves towards the rear of the bus, and then when you open up the rear hatch in the full open position, what that does, it leaves an escape route for the smoke. So essentially, when you use both items together, the rear roof hatch open and the HVAC system on, then the air will immediately move towards the rear of the coach and exit out the roof hatch. And eventually all the air, all of the particulates will dissipate on the interior of the coach. So we found that to be the most effective means to ventilating the coach with the least amount of exposure to everybody on board. Because for one, the air stays pretty low to the ground until it gets ready to exit. Then it rises at the rear of the bus and exit through the rear hatch. So that was proven to be the most effective means of ventilating the coach. And we've tried it with the windows, several windows open and no air condition. And one of the other things that, one of the other items that was suggested is that we open windows, open all of the windows on board the coach. Well, what that eventually did is we opened up one window and it slowly moved the air towards the front of the coach. Well, if you open up more windows, it begins to aggressively move towards the front of the coach and collect at the front. So opening one or any windows is not a good thing, because what that does, it creates the turbulence and an uneasy atmosphere, and all the air eventually will collect at the front of the coach, which is not healthy for anybody at the front of the coach, the operator, or any passengers that are boarding the coach. So, so essentially, that is the best means that we've determined through the smoke test, is to open the rear hatch, turn on the air condition, and allow the air to dissipate. And some of the questions that we received is, well, what if you're in the wintertime? Do we want to run the AC in the wintertime? Well, what we're saying is you can run the AC, but there's different temperatures involved. You can set the temperature on the AC so that it functions in the same way. Circulation operates the same way, but the temperature, you can adjust the temperature. So you won't have to freeze everybody on the bus during the winter time. If you run the AC, you set the temperature up to whatever's comfortable, 75 degrees, and it'll still maintain that temperature inside the coach, but the circulation is what we're interested in. So it's the air conditioned setting that allows the unit to do its job and circulate the air and dissipate it out through the rear hatch. So that was it was pretty surprising to see the results, but nonetheless, that is what we've discovered, that the air movement does move in certain ways that we can't really explain. However, those characteristics do present themselves.
Thank you, Tabby. We'll hand it over back to Hannah.
Well, thank you so much, Tabby and Cecil, for doing the research to make bus travel safe. It's so important. Also in commuting, there's ride sharing. And so we can also think about an automobile as a really teeny office. And because it's so teeny, there's ways to get lots of air changes per hour as well, with the HVAC system on and without the windows open. And like Bart is doing, there's an opportunity to have a quiet ride protocol where people aren't speaking. And there's also the opportunity to screen for early symptoms to reduce the chance that somebody walks into the vehicle that can transmit virus. And think of the transaction between the driver and the rider as a contract. So there's a permission structure to correct each other for safe behavior. So that's commute ride sharing, but also Lyft and Uber have added another layer of protection by installing plastic barriers between the drivers and riders. So now that we have a safe commute, let's look at the office, and we're going to layer on our imperfect measures to create a very safe office. So we're going to lower the case count, number one. Number two, we're going to have a safer culture. And from a TDM standpoint, we're interested in what signage we can put up to reinforce that behavior, and how we can have tabling, virtual tabling or virtual commute fair-like events to help educate folks. Screening, masks, distance, hygiene. We've covered HVAC a lot, which is the most complex of the 7 safety layers. And from a TDM standpoint, we might think about what is the super concise front window sticker that says this office has COVID safe air? How do we convey that concisely? So let's go into the imperfect measures. So in Santa Clara County, there's orange and yellow levels. Orange allows significant reopening and yellow allows lots of reopening. And in April, we were below orange, and in May, we were pretty close to yellow, and now we've had a spike. So we need to wait until the case count goes down again. And in terms of culture, in TDM, we tend to persuade people to voluntarily change their commute mode. But now we're talking about, for safety, how do we get to 100% compliance? And one technique we like to use from behavioral psychology is to get people to make pledges in front of their peers and to raise their right hand. And part of that pledge can provide a permission structure for each other to correct each other. So we're going to raise the bar on the social norm. We're going to use peer pressure. And up front, if you have a worker that doesn't want to comply, then they can continue to work from home. So this is this 100% conformance behavior change with humans, which is really tricky. One example is in World War II, 100% of Londoners turned off their lights at night to not be targets for Nazi bombing. And whereas with seatbelts and other things, they get kind of close, but not quite to 100%. It's tricky with humans. For screening, there are apps that give you a QR code, screen for all the different virus symptoms, get a QR code if you pass yourself, and you can enter your front door. For masks, the good news is we're thinking that the air in your plexiglass area is safe, so you don't have to wear a mask at your desk, but when you get up, you do have to put it on. So think about wearing a mask for 2 hours a day versus 9 hours, because we think some employees would prefer to work at home rather than wearing a mask all day. And employers have the opportunity to provide well-fitting, comfortable masks and to reduce glasses fogging. And one thing that is being explored is whether those comfy masks can really help protect the wearer even more and provide additional safety at the mask filter level. And some of your employees may be small government libertarians who are concerned about government overreach and concerned about being forced to wear masks. But interestingly, the top libertarian think tank just had a podcast on this and came out in favor of mask wearing. So going back to that World War II example, you have a negative externality from having your lights on at night that would make you a bombing target. So it was a small inconvenience to turn off your lights for a large social good. And they characterized mask wearing as the same small inconvenience for large social good. And of course, with the invisible hand of capitalism, employers need to follow government guidance to reduce their liability exposure. So that's masks. For physical distancing, in our picture below, we've got the two employees separated by plexiglass, and right now the guidance is they should Zoom even though they're 10 feet away from each other rather than heading to the conference room, which is kind of a bummer, but there you have it. For hygiene, we're all going to get better at hand washing, and washing your hands 10 times per day has many health benefits beyond just COVID protection. And there are examples of great hand washing where you can sing Bohemian Rhapsody to yourself. And then the seventh and final layer is HVAC, and we've spoken to 4 building owners representing hundreds of buildings, and they're all on top of the situation, thankfully. They all have MERV 13, and they are very willing to spend more on their utility bill to bring in as much fresh air from the outside as they can, and they're aware of the liability issues to keep buildings safe, and they don't want the reputation risk of having a breakout in one of their buildings. So that's the 7 layers for office building that makes office safe. And last slide before we finish, and if Casey can pull up the poll, let's read this here. So this is a 2-question poll. So number 1, here's the problem. We're talking about culture, office safety culture. Your coworkers might not be as conscientious about COVID safety as you are. How important of a concern is addressing office culture, where 1 is not very important and 5 is extremely important? Okay, so it's a known issue, the concern about office culture. And the second question presents the messaging about the way we solve office safety culture. Before returning to the office, all coworkers will undergo COVID safety training, sign a pledge, practice friendly behavior correction, safe hygiene, and use mobile applications. Your CEO will be a leader. So how effective will this be? So we're measuring in number 1, the importance of the office safety culture problem. And in number 2, we're measuring the quality of our solution messaging. How persuasive is it?
We'll give it another second or two here, Steve.
Thanks everybody for answering this complex set of 2 questions rapidly.
Okay, I'm gonna, so here are the results.
Okay, so this problem is considered very important, getting 5s and 4s, and the solution is getting 4s and 5s. So it says the solution, you're pretty comfortable that it's going to do a good job of solving the problem. Got it. Okay, so with that set of 2 questions as background, we're really interested in knowing what the commute mode share is going to be in January. So Bart wants to know what their ridership is going to be. Building owners want to know how full their buildings are going to be. Employers want to know if they need to actually get more space because of physical distancing, want to know if they're going to get parking constraints. And many of the ACT members can help employers do a great forecast like this. At ALTRANS, we like to use information acceleration, which is an MIT technique. So we time travel each employee 4 months in the future into January and explain to them what it's like. And we use this gap filling methodology where you have those problem solution paired questions. And as people are answering that, they're getting the messaging, the confidence boosting messaging about the different safety measures across different known issues with return to office. And it's a way to test that messaging. And if you have something that is important, so in the graph on the right, the office safety culture has high importance, but we haven't been effective in our messaging to make people confident, then you need to kind of go back and work on that. But otherwise, for office air safety in this example graph below, it was very important, but an effective solution was messaged. So you're taking people through the issues and the solutions, and by the end, they're really into 4 months in the future mode, and then you ask them about what's your January commute mode going to be like. So that's the effective way of forecasting. At least that's the way ALTRANS thinks of that, with kind of a rare methodology to do that. And with that, we are ready for questions. And thanks everybody for sticking with this webinar.
Yes, thank you all, and thank you to our panelists. And again, to remind all of you before we start here with some of these questions, if you do have a question for our panelists, please go ahead and type it in the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen, and please type in who the question is for as we get going here. We should have a good amount of time to try to get as many questions as we can answered, and they're all starting to come in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. This first one here is probably for you, Hannah. Steve, if you want to jump in a little bit too, but largely for you, Hannah. This is great information on BART's processes, and it makes me feel better about my next public transit ride in the Bay Area, but I don't live there. Do national or state standards exist for all transit providers? And if so, how closely does BART's effort match with those standards, or did BART do this largely on their own?
Thank you. That is a great question. So we relied heavily on World Health Organization, CDC, state and county health department guidance. So we really leaned on all of that sort of the existing data and best practice that's out there. Mm-hmm. In parallel, there actually is a national APTA, the American Public Transportation Association, has just recently released their health and safety commitments program. And it's a very similar set of measures. Transit agencies can become part of that program and have a seal that they can display on vehicles so that riders know that they're part of that system. And it similarly looks at cleaning, face mask wearing, sanitation, having space, sharing information, all those types of things. So it is a very similar set of measures in the APTA program. And so BART and AC Transit are also both participating in that.
Excellent. Okay. This next question is for you, Tabby. Do you have a report which explains the various tests you tried?
Yes, actually we do. It's in the form of a board report. It hasn't been released yet. It's a report to our board of directors, and it outlines the tests that we did and the measures that we took but it hasn't been published yet. As a matter of fact, it hasn't gone before the board yet. But that should be, I think it should be ratified probably within, I'd say within the next few weeks.
Okay, excellent.
And also, Tabby, there's a chance you're going to release a YouTube of your smoke test, correct?
That's correct. We are working on a video. We did 2 videos. We actually did a raw video when we did the test the first time around, just to see how the smoke behaved. But then once it's been determined that it worked well, we received some requests to have, can we release that video, which wasn't a very clean video. So we actually went back and did the process again and cleaned it up, and we come up with a clean video. So we're working on that right now.
Excellent. Okay, this next question is said for anyone. We have been hearing from employees who were previously transit riders that they will drive to work until it is safe to ride transit again. Are there any studies, data, articles that discuss the issue and how to address this with these employees? I don't know if Steve or anyone want to take that one first.
It's probably for Hannah. But.
So yeah, I'm trying. So there are various articles that have indicated that there's not known, major outbreaks from rising transit. That transit in general does appear to be appears to be generally safe. But I don't know if there's like an academic study that supports that at this stage. I think that what we want to do is make the environment, take what we know about the virus and make the environment as safe as possible, so that it is somewhere, a place that people can ride. Let me see if I can pull up some articles, and hopefully I can share in the chat if I can find them quickly. I'll see if I can share them with the group.
Right, and the transit agencies have been taking an engineering approach to proving for themselves the safety case based on knowledge. And then Europe is ahead of the US in trying out the shrinking from 6 feet to 3 feet distancing. So it's going to be helpful to garner their experience.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. This next question is for you, Steve. Steve, can you get into any specific recommendations for bathroom, shower, or locker room areas?
Yes, and I refer everybody to the bit.ly Google Doc, Safe Office Return. There's a section there on some of those special cases, but for restroom, wear your mask, keep it quiet, and if the HVAC engineer finds that there's dead air in that room, then potentially you stick in a HEPA tower box to scrub the air right there in the local vicinity.
Okay. Excellent. And I did have a couple people ask Steve if you could put some of those links in the chat if possible as well. I know it's on that slide there, but just so people can easily click on it would be great. This next question for all panelists, can any of you speak to how you are communicating these safe practices? We saw examples of what look like on-site posters for BART. Can you all speak to what other tools and channels you have used to promote safe commuting?
I can speak as to what we're doing here at AC Transit. This is Tabby Davenport again. What we've done, we've come up, we have a print shop and an in-house print shop. So we were able to come up with the signs, all the necessary signs for entering facilities, to signs that will affix to the inside and the outside of the vehicles, and at the transit centers, reminding folks to do safe distancing, and also face masks are required, and hand sanitizers, and our PPE that's going to be available inside of our vehicles. So we've displayed signs for just about everything that that we've outlined in we have a SMART program that outlines the entire safety for the district and for anyone that's entering any of our properties. So we've displayed signs for pretty much everything: high touch surfaces, social distancing in our facilities, in our transit centers. So signage is pretty much the key to what to our messaging. And also we have the enunciator messages that are inside of our vehicles as well that remind everybody of the safe practices that we're promoting at AC Transit.
I would say, you know, at BART, we have the in-station signage, and then we have also for, you know, our locations for employees that are reporting, there's signage in the office setting or on the shops to indicate measures people are supposed to be taking, as well as we have a weekly email from the general manager that goes to everybody that communicates sort of latest information, you know, updates. We have a SharePoint site that includes all of the relevant information, so everybody can feel, you know, up to date and in the loop about the latest that the agency is, the steps that we're taking, you know, where we stand, and the latest information. So it's very useful to have like sort of that constant communication district-wide.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. This next one, quickly back to you, Hannah. Someone wanted to know, actually, I had two people. What system or software is used to keep track of and report to commuters' train car capacity? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I did send that question out to our ops folks to get the right program. And so what we're using is we're merging the Fairgate data and train performance data. And then we use analytics programs to assign riders to different trains. And the programs are a combination of in-house programs that we've developed and SAS analytics. And so they're, you know, based on data that we get from the Fairgates, and then we, you know, use our programming to allocate across. So they are averages. And so you could anticipate that, you know, you'll have your best bet of getting those less full cars at the end of the train, since the center cars are typically the most full. And we're running long cars right now, so you have plenty of cars to choose from.
Excellent. Thank you. This next question, I got a couple people asking about carpooling here. Steve, maybe you can jump in for this one. With regard to carpooling, how many passengers would be considered safe social distancing? 2 or 3? And what about van pooling?
So for ride sharing right now, the answer is 2 people. And to break through to 3 people in that vehicle, you think about the progress on transit from 6-foot social distancing down to 3-foot social distancing. Doing the work for the airflow smoke tests like AC Transit has done is going to be a way to boost confidence when you really validate exactly what you're doing. Some Stanford research says if you have your HVAC in the car to bring in fresh air with a low fan, you get 35 air changes per hour. So air changes out every 2 minutes, which should be pretty safe. And then if there's a breakthrough in protection for your own mask wearing, where say you can insert a HEPA filter and increase your safety, that will further reinforce this. And then fan pooling is the same, 6-foot social distancing, and airflow really matters. And I think the van pooling industry is going to have to start doing the analysis of airflow themselves, like AC Transit has done.
Okay. And this next part here on carpooling, do you have any information, you can kind of touch upon it a little bit in your article, do you have any information on the safety of carpooling? Are there any recommendations on the number of people, obviously for a pool, or the best way to keep the air fresh in the vehicle?
Yeah, really, 2 people now per carpool, potentially considering what Lyft and Uber are doing with the plastic barriers between the passenger and the rider. And then as we learn more in other type vehicle situations, moving from 2 people to 3 people.
Okay. And this next one here, I appreciate that the Cato message will be helpful with the thoughtful libertarians, but what about coworkers who are more likely to be influenced by less established institutions or influences, particularly via social media or even dark web? Won't that ruin it for an entire office? And he writes, disclaimer, this is not my office culture.
Yeah, really important to get that 100% behavior change, and everybody who's willing to return to the office to provide that pledge of behavior. And so hopefully there's the option for that particular employee that they can continue to work from home. But again, there's a strong capitalist argument that employers have to follow public health guidance to protect their own liability. So there's a way for even that dark web loving person to be empathetic with where the employer is in terms of a liability standpoint.
Excellent. Okay. Just a couple more here. How are you comparing, leveraging, borrowing the best practices and, in my perception, of the success of the airline industry in addressing public perception of health risks in transit? It seems they are winning the PR battle. Does anyone have a response to that?
Well, I mean, I would say there's millions of dollars at stake for all these economic sectors, including the airlines. And so their story was on scrubbing the air and disinfectation. And so they had, they're basically saying, many more air changes per hour with whatever it was, MERV 13 filtration. And so that kind of messaging is what we're seeing from Bay Area Healthy Transit. So very similar, and that holds good promise that the public can be convinced about the safety of returning to transit and ride sharing and so forth.
Okay. I think we have answered pretty much all of the questions this afternoon. And again, I know Steve has mentioned here that he has that bit.ly document available for folks to view that goes a little bit more into detail than what we heard this afternoon. And I want to take a moment and thank all of our panelists today. You did a wonderful job. We appreciate all the information you shared. Very insightful for a very large group here that was in presence. And I just want to remind all the folks on the line here this afternoon that we do have a second webinar this month coming up. It'll be Tuesday, September 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. The Disturbed Office Model, a commute-based approach to a safe return to work, sponsored by Commutify. You can go ahead and register online today, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks for that webinar. Thank you all again, and have a great afternoon.